All right, here are the words again. How did you do? Check your list against this list. Now, let's talk about how we can better encode information so that we can remember it better. Now, the activity that we just did is a great example of the levels of processing theory, which states that the deeper you process information, the easier it then is to retrieve again. So let's say maybe when you saw that list of words, you might have maintained them in your short-term memory by repeating them a bunch. So again, here's the list of words to kind of refresh you. So you might have used maintenance rehearsal. You might have rehearsed that information just by repeating it over and over again. So maybe you were like, all right, chair, chair, table, table, and you went through the list in that way. Now, encoding just the word itself, the visual appearance of the word, doesn't require much processing. You're just looking at it. We call that shallow processing. But it also doesn't really engage with the word much. Now, instead, maybe you thought about how the words were connected to each other. Maybe you made up a story like that, okay, there are chairs around a table. Maybe you pictured what this scene might look like. When you process these words more deeply by thinking about their relevance and your personal relationship to them, they become a lot easier to remember than when you just focus on surface level features. Now, encoding this meaningfulness is called elaborative rehearsal because you're actively working with it, you're linking it to material that you previously learned about. And it produces this deeper level of attention and processing because you're providing your brain with information to anchor it to that your brain already knows. Now, deep processing is what makes information easier to retrieve. So let's go through some different tactics of how you could process things deeply. And I know it's spelled wrong, but just go with it. So first, you could think about distinctiveness. How is this new concept that you've learned different from other concepts you've learned about? So if you can make clear contrasts between the things that you're studying, it might help you remember your concepts that you need. The E stands for elaboration. So you might want to ask how your particular concept relates to other concepts. How does it associate with other things that you've learned? How is it related? You also want to apply that information. Think about how you're expected to utilize that information, what you're expected to apply that concept to. So practicing recalling that information in ways that maybe you might see on the exam in different kind of application style questions might be a useful way for you to process it deeper. And then lastly, make it personal. How can you relate that particular concept to your own personal experience? Relating it to your own life helps increase its meaningfulness and helps with elaboration, making it distinct, and really sticking it, giving it something in your brain to latch onto. So there are some pretty cool phenomena with long-term memory. We just talked about how the deeper you process information, the more likely you are to remember it. But fun fact, when you learn that information plays a role too, specifically for lists of words like we just tested on. So there's an effect called the serial position effect, which states that the likelihood you're going to remember an item depends on its position in the list. So think back to the words that you were able to recall. Do you notice any pattern compared to the words that you maybe didn't get? So given a word list like this one, we've shown through various research studies that certain words are going to be remembered more than others. Now, one effect of this is called the primacy effect, which says that if you have a series of words running from word 1 to word 20, the first couple words are going to be remembered really well. They have a higher probability of recall. So primacy effect is the superior recall for the first couple items on the list. And the reason that you tend to recall the first items pretty well is because you've rehearsed them more and you're able to kind of store them in your long-term memory. Now, the middle of the list kind of just gets muddied over, right? It's kind of hard to remember the things in the middle because you've got stuff to interfere with and that sort of thing. But the effect goes back up again at the end. And this is because of a recency effect. This is the superior recall for the last couple items on the list. And the reason that you do well on this is because you're actively working on these items still. You heard them the most recently, and your brain is still kind of processing them and working with them. They're the most fresh in your brain still. Now, this works when you're instantly asked to recall it right afterwards. But if you delay that retrieval, for instance, if you studied a list of words and then were asked to do a different task, this recency effect is going to disappear because now they're not really in your working or short-term memory anymore.